Hey folks, today I've got the new Spider-Man retro carded wave in hand. And first up, I'm gonna take a look at the new Elektra Daredevil action figure. As usual, please like, share, comment, subscribe, or even hit that super thanks button. I do appreciate all engagement on my channel. Now, I'm reviewing this figure first because to me, it looks the best out of this wave. So let's see if that's really the case. Now on this card back series, they've actually changed up the design and logo on that card back, adopting a more modern aesthetic for the logo as well as all the web patterns in the background. Here we have the figure and she comes with two sai. Now we move on to the back of the packaging. The render of the figure over here holding her only two weapons, description of the character over here, and finally some product information at the bottom. So let's go ahead and get this figure open. To open up the figure, I slice the plastic bubble off the card back so I can store the card back easily. Elektra Daredevil comes with two sai. These are cast in a dull metallic looking plastic, flat red paint for the grips. And these are the same sculpt as all the sai that has come with Hasbro Marvel Legends Elektra action figures. And that means that they are also cast in that soft, child-safe plastic. Elektra Daredevil comes with hands that are sculpted with exactly the same grips. So she holds the sai just as well as all other Elektra figures. Elektra Daredevil is on a completely brand new sculpt, and I think this is really a much needed breath of fresh air when you consider most Hasbro figures have a lot of part reuse. So just standing here in a vanilla pose, it really looks quite nice because of the freshness and novelty in all of those new parts. The one thing that however does stick out to me is how her scarf as well as her skirt is sculpted kind of flowing in the wind, so it looks dramatic and I like the effect. However, it is kind of stuck in this weird, stiff position, and after looking at it for a while, it starts to look a little awkward. So once again, I do think Hasbro Marvel Legends could definitely benefit from a couple of soft goods accessories. Better still if these soft goods also have bendy wire so you can pose them, and you can change the way she looks, whether in vanilla or action stances. The sculpting details are also nice. But before we jump into her head sculpt, I just want to talk about its scarf as well. You can also see all the folds in the fabric as it gathers around her neck and face, and it flows down her back as well. Now to get a closer look at her face, I just want to pull off that scarf. So popping off her head and slipping that scarf off, now proportionally it starts to look a little wonky. Her head sits a little too high on her neck, probably to accommodate the sculpt of the scarf, and it also looks a little small compared to the rest of her body. Her head is cast in a red plastic, sharp paint for the whites of her eyes, and also flesh tone paint for the rest of her face. Once again with the digital printing, you can see very sharp applications of red for her lip color as well, and there's also some nice shading around her cheeks, as well as the brow area on that mask. The shading also helps to bring out and make her look stern and determined. The back of her head, we see her hair sculpt. It's wavy and tied up. Attached over here, it's a little soft and flexible, but it does not rotate. And we have that red paint for the band on the middle that holds the hair together. Her upper torso as well as her shoulder joints, these are cast in a red plastic. Black paint for the stripes that run down the sides of her torso. The lower torso is instead a black plastic, with the red paint for the stripe that runs down the middle, as well as the strip around her belt area. I like how there's textures sculpted in her torso, subtle wrinkles on her abdomen area, as well as near her chest. So this is a nice touch to show the consistency of the fabric. The Daredevil logo in black is also sharply printed on. The rest of her arms are cast in a black plastic. Pins are concealed at her elbows, while there's nice red paint running down on her bicep for the stripe, as well as a couple of straps that run around her bicep area. On her forearms, the rest of them, for the wrapping, is a separate red plastic that's attached to the black plastic on the forearm. Her hands are sculpted with that same nice strap texture on the back of her hand, as well as on the inside of her palms. And the rest of it is painted in black for her fingers that are exposed beyond the straps. Now her belt and skirt piece is cast in a red plastic. Nice detail like the buckle, as well as the pouches on the side with the buttons. We go on to the lower part of her body, and it's mostly cast in black plastic with the baggy sculpt, looking very ninja-esque. And I also like how the fabric kind of falls naturally, a little more baggy around the thigh area, but becomes more fitting around the knees, leading on to her boots that have a strapped design. From her calf downwards, it's all cast in the red plastic, so it's neat and there's a nice separation between the reds and blacks. And finally, the boot ends with her feet, which has a small heel at the back, giving her that extra height and boost. So overall, there's a lot of nice new detail and an interesting sculpt all over this figure. Despite having no paint on the lower part of her body, the clear separation of the reds and blacks makes it look interesting to look at. And overall, the mix of red and black plastics and paints look fairly consistent over the entire figure. It feels like a long time since I've said this, but I'm actually really pleased with how the paint and the sculpt has worked out on this figure. Now, having a look at articulation, I put on that scarf once again to show a little bit of how the restriction affects the neck articulation. Her neck is on a double ball dumbbell joint, but because of how restrictive the scarf is, you mostly get just some sideways turning instead of a full 360. The joint actually has a fair bit of range, but you know, she can look down pretty well, but it looks kind of ridiculous tucking her entire face into that scarf. And once again, also being able to look up, but because of how that scarf is rigid and doesn't follow her head, her face starts to be exposed. Slipping that scarf off to show you the full range of this joint. So of course, there's no problems 360, and there is actually fantastic tilt sideways, and of course, she looks down quite well as a good bit looking upwards. And from this angle, you can start seeing the separation between her head and her neck. Swivel hinge at the shoulders for 360 spin, as well as coming out, a very good range of motion. Swivel at the upper bicep, double hinged elbows with the pins well concealed and superb range. Swivel hinge at the wrist for 360 spin, articulating down as well as up for weapon wielding hands. And this is on her left fist, while on her right, she's instead got a hinge that goes in and out. Mid-torso ball joint for 360 spin, going all the way around and affording some sideways tilting. However, that range is really poor bending forward, but more than sufficient going backwards. Ball joints at the hips that go outward a decent bit. And because of the baggy sculpt, there's really not much range that you can get out of it moving forward and backward just that much. So when you consider how limited the forward bend in her torso is, as well as the range in her ball joints over here at her hips, it's a pity that she cannot get into deeper and wider action stances, which you would expect from a very agile and flexible character like Elektra. So I'm thinking of doing a couple of modifications, but I suppose I'll do it for another day. She's got a thigh swivel over here for some 360 spin. However, the thigh swivel cut isn't very nice, and it breaks up the sculpt as you twist it. Double hinged knees with the pins concealed as well, and she's got pretty decent range considering how baggy the pants are. And in a big surprise, we have a calf swivel on a female character. Finally, on her ankles, she's got very good upward tilt and downward tilt, as well as outward pivot and inwards. For a brand new sculpt, Elektra Daredevil feels like quite a well-engineered figure. The joints feel solid, and the articulation feels fluid within its permitted range. However, I do think the mid-torso ball joint, as well as the ball jointed hips, could be improved for much greater range that would showcase Elektra's flexibility and agility. So Hasbro didn't give us any other alternate heads, but I suppose we can use those from a couple of Elektra figures that have already been released. I just want to point out that over here, since we have her lined up with the other Elektra figures, you can see that she stands taller than the rest, and you can gauge that by looking at how high her eyes sit on the figure compared to the rest. And that's because she's got heels sculpted on those feet. So here we have the red comic Elektra head on the new body, and it looks really good. I think the head looks more proportional to the body, and it also sits lower on that neck peg. So this is a really great option for a head swap. The head from the white suited Elektra also fits onto the figure just fine. However, that white headband doesn't match up with the red on the rest of her outfit. The head sculpt from the Netflix Elektra also looks good on the body. However, I will also want to point out that the gap is pretty big on the back of the head and the neck. And you will also notice that I did not fit on her scarf because all the other alternate head sculpts over here have quite large hair sculpts at the back that would interfere with that rigid scarf. And if you want a more comic style look with a scarf across her mouth, you can always try on the head from the Fan's Choice silk figure. I think it works well, but it also looks like it sits a little too low on the neck peg. Size-wise, Elektra Daredevil stands at about 6 inches to the top of her head, and that's just over 15 centimeters. To the top of her ponytail, that's about 6.5 inches, and that's about 16.5 centimeters. For size comparisons, she still stands about half a head shorter than the old and the new Daredevil Marvel Legends action figures. And here she is with the Defenders team. And here she is with Null, Hand Ninjas, Kingpin, and Bullseye. For comparisons with other lines, here she is with some G.I. Joe Classified series and some Star Wars Black series. This Elektra Daredevil is not without its faults, but she certainly feels like an oasis in the desert of Hasbro's action figure repaints and rehashing. Although a well-engineered figure, she could have had more range in her torso and hip ball joints. I also think she could have had some alternate heads and hands and some more weapons. But with Hasbro's pricing strategy today, I almost feel like I gotta be grateful to get a brand new sculpted comic figure at a regular price point. Take it ironically or not, this figure deserves a recommendation from me. Please like and share this video, let me know what you think in the comments below, subscribe to my channel, or even hit the super thanks button. Thanks for watching, take care and stay safe.